Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight, Plague of Shadows. In the last part, we finished off Treasure Knight, the Iron Whale, and now before we head off to the last night of Section 2, it's time for us to head up the Bottomless Quarry. Vast riches ahead, but there are too many bottomless pits. If only there was some way to make a platform. Since we got the vat in the Iron Whale, we can do this little side area, so I figured we might as well do this before we head on over there just to get the gold in case I can buy anything extra along the way, be it some casings or other stuff that I'm probably not going to use. This is probably one of my favorites across the entire 4-campaign game of Treasure Trove for the little side levels. Just because there is something intensely satisfying about using the vat to save yourself from a bottomless pit and just continue saying no to the bottomless pit. It's like chaining air dashes in like a Mega Man X or the next game we're doing when it comes to doing the air strikes if you can. It's just nice and satisfying. With that said, if you didn't do enough of the game or didn't focus on getting the power bar upgrades, this can definitely be a bit of a dangerous level just because how much does the vat take up? Like a full solid bar on its own? Ooh, that's like 2.5. Yeah, you're gonna really need these jar pickups in the case that you didn't get those upgrades. And I think I want to say there might be a feat for beating this campaign without getting a feat. I'll look that up when we get into the next level, because since we're about to finish this stage off, I mean, it's going to be time for the next Knight's Bio. With that said, I say that, but before we go into Mole Knight's level, we're going to go pick up the last armor from the Troutful King that we haven't gotten yet. And this is potentially my least favorite, but I can see why people might use it. The Goo Garment. It does a little more than the bio says. It gives you a bit of a slapdash wall jump after you use a burst bomb, in that you bounce off of walls uncontrollably, but you also are extraordinarily slippery and speedy on the ground. It's for someone that someone is not me. With that said, let's now talk about Mole Knight. The shovel may rule the confines of man-made gardens, but in the wild, the titan of tunneling is the male. Mole Knight embraces this truth wholeheartedly. With his modified drop-forged armor claws, he mockingly tears through the earth with brute strength. Mole Knight calls the subterranean lost city his home, an ancient abandoned metropolis. Shovel Knight must pass through the lost city, but chances are slim he won't be challenged to see who is truly the master at digging. They keep mentioning this guy in the bios. I don't know who he is, but this is the Plague Knight game. Pros, he's got great eyesight, weird for a mole. He's shrewd, and he's got some high endurance. Cons, he's rather obsessive, and he gets sweaty in his armor. And you know what, while we're thinking about it, we might as well talk about Plague Knight's own bio. Sometimes the bomb is mightier than the sword. Deep in the recesses of his alchemical lab, Plague Knight perfects concoctions both poisonous and explosive. Toxin, disease, and death are his playgrounds. Even his comrades give Plague Knight a wide berth, because he spreads more than just the common cold. With an array of mysterious and magical bottles at his side, Plague Knight could be considered the black sheep of the Order of No Quarter. Pros, he's got a maniacal scientific mind, and he's fearless, bordering on reckless. Cons, he's physically weak, he's kind of short, and he's rather shy at parties, apparently. So now let's talk about the feats that Plague of Shadows got. It's got some of the usual ones. It's got less than Shovel of Hope does. Finishing the game is one of them. Collecting all the Cypher Coins is another. Purchasing all upgrades and equipment and all that. Same with New Game Plus is there. There's one for clearing a certain stage we'll be doing later this part in less than 3 minutes and 30 seconds. There's one for finishing a stage without taking any damage. These next two are the reasons I probably haven't done all the feats for this game. Finishing the game without spending any money, including Cypher Coins. No thank you. One for finishing the game without collecting any Arcana, bomb parts, or armors. Again, no thank you. One for finishing the game in less than an hour and a half, which that was the worst trophy in getting the Shovel Knight one on its own, barring New Game Plus. There's another for breaking every checkpoint in the game that's possible. I don't think you need to do that on a single run. I think you can technically do that across multiple runs of a stage, I want to say. There's one for emerging from the boss rush down the line without getting hit, except by King Knight for some reason. There's one for finishing the Explodatorium without breaking any of the gray box during the fight against Shovel Knight, and I guess you would need to use the lob or float type casings for that. There's one for giving all the relics to Chester. There's one for being up in the air for 10 seconds without landing on anything. Float casing from memory is pretty good for that. There's one for beating any of the Order Knights by only using bomb jump explosions, so you kind of got to get close and do your bomb burst and just hit them with that. I do know they specifically say the Order Knight, so you can't specifically use like the Plains of Passage Black Knight fight since that has less health. There's one for giving Oolong a sample of every explosion type by throwing it into his little chimney, because he does have a different reaction to each of those. There's one we did earlier, actually, which is watching all of Mona's dance. This one I'm curious on how you do. It's probably the component powder, if I had to guess, finishing any of the Order No Quarter by using 15 bombs or fewer. Teetotaler, which is finishing the game without drinking any tonics, which means you're limited to at most 7 health for most of the game. A little rough. And then one we did earlier, technically, which is finding Plague Knight's secret room in his own level. Also, we just picked up the relic for this stage. I've already forgotten what it is. I think it might be the Dust Knuckles. That sounds right. This stage can be probably one of the more dangerous ones for Plague Knight, if only because you're probably gonna, like I did on my first playthrough, get really greedy, especially using the float casing, to try to ignore sections of this stage over bottomless pits, or in this case, particularly lava. And during the section from when we were playing a Shovel Knight where you have to, like, hit the goop into the lava to make it into goop temporarily and bounce off of it, that's not a problem there. It's particularly whenever you're doing one of the auto-scrolling segments with the gigantic beetles with the bouncy backs, that being greedy like that is probably a bad idea. I imagine it's probably possible to skip all that if you're really precise. I don't know the game well enough to be able to do that, though. If there was any other, admittedly, campaign for Shovel Knight, I've been tempted to go get all the feats in. It is definitely Spectre of Torment, if only because the way that one controls, I find pleasurable enough to do it. This just gets on my nerves enough, plus the limitations on Plague Knight's stats means I don't have any interest in doing the, like, Arcanaless playthroughs. Whereas King Knight, he's just got too many levels. Way too many levels. Because let's see, from memory, by and large, Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope, Plague of Shadows, Spectre Torment, each of those are about 20 levels, counting Plains of Passage, I think, and the side levels. From memory, King Knight's about double to triple that because he does 2 or 3 to 4 smaller stages per aesthetic that are very focused on one mechanic, and I can appreciate that fact of it, but it definitely can drag on a bit if you die too many times. Ugh. If it's not obvious, King Knight's campaign is probably my least favorite of the 4. In some regards. In some regards, it's also this one. I'll talk more about that towards the credits, though. For now, it's time to grab Plague Knight's newest Arcana. This one's interesting, the Smoke Bomb. This is sort of his contemporary to the Phase Locket that Shovel Knight used. You throw the bomb, it goes a bit of an arc, and it lands on the ground, creating a smoke cloud. When you stand in the smoke, and for a moment after you leave it, you are completely invincible. The smoke cloud does fade after a little bit, though, so it's not like you can take it across an entire room, and it does cost a lot of power. So it's kind of limited in use in some regards just because of that, like you use it across certain spike pits or to ignore some hazards. But compared to the Phase Locket where you could jump out of it and just ignore a lot of stuff, it's not exactly that useful. It's complicated to do sub-weapons sometimes because not even all of Shovel Knights were useful. From memory, I want to say the character where their sub-weapons are the most useful is probably overall, honestly, King Knight. Just because of how his levels are structured to begin with. There's more where they're specifically tailored to using this specific sub-weapon in some cases. But Spectre Knights weren't awful. But the fact that I at least use 3 or 4 of Plague Knights reliably, the others definitely fall by the wayside. Because even Shovel Knights, I think I only really use, barring the chalices, Chaos Sphere, Phase Locket, Propeller Dagger, and Warhorn are like the main ones I use, and a lot of those you don't have for a lot of the game. That does kind of make me wish that in some update for the game, for all the campaigns, you just got access to a mode where all the levels are located more in like a Mega Man kind of stage select. You can go to them in any order to get whichever sub-weapons you want, because I think that could be an interesting way to play this game. But all the updates, the most you got for something like that is cheat codes that allowed you to start with X sub-weapon, and that's about it. Sometimes ones that gave you certain armors too, if memory serves. I guess on that note, it could be interesting to see what they could do with a potential Shovel Knight sequel down the line, even if it is just a campaign that's only Shovel Knights. Because from the 5-year development cycle the main game on top of the extra campaigns took, they probably did learn a lot for what they could do with the various mechanics that the characters have. Could be even interesting to say, have some of the other characters that didn't get voted to have their own campaigns have one in some form there. Like maybe a sequel has a... I don't know which one would go with. Maybe a Propeller Knight campaign, I guess. Assuming they wouldn't just do that for a new set of knights instead. Maybe have one of the other playable characters return just because they were popular or something like that. Probably Plague Knight or Spectre Knight if they were to do that. Also, you might see me at times when I'm waiting for platforms now just accidentally start dancing because something about the way that the Shovel Knight games handle their ducking, where it's just you bend down about 2 pixels, is the right kind of animation for me to dance to the music in no matter what. It's like shooting your Mega Buster to the music in autoscrollers and Mega Man games, or ducking and looking up and to music in Sonic games. It's a nice little filler. You'd think I would take advantage of the fact you actually have a dance animation for that, but unfortunately the dance doesn't really sync to most of the music that well because it's time for a very specific piece of music later on in the game. For reasons, TM. With that said, we're coming up on the end of the stage, and this is probably the only one of the Beatles sections where I'd be comfortable in using the bomb burst to skip a lot of it just because you have more platforms in the way. So be careful of these radioactive Medusa head birds because they will really easily mess you up, especially with Plague Knight's greater inherent knockback without this armor on. But Mole Knight isn't going to be too bad, thankfully, because he shares a similar problem to Treasure Knight in that since he is usually on the ground, he's very easy to lock. You gotta be kidding me. You're the demolitions expert? You're a day late. Don't you stand there. Start blasting. Hop to it. I'm afraid I'm not exactly here to help with your dig. But I'm certainly here for demolitions. Boom! I should have known you were just gonna clown around. Can't let that happen on my watch. Let's make this quick. Oh, we will. Mole Knight likes to bounce between the walls, digging through them and slowly ascending and falling to try and hit you before sliding on the ground, sending some projectiles in the opposite direction from when he's bouncing. When he stops doing that, he's going to make some blocks rain down and try to knock them into you, but if you use the component powder, that one don't get much of a chance to do anything. After that, he usually likes to dig into the floor, and he's dead. Again, bosses like this, Plague Knight has a pretty good way of taking care of, as you can see. But that wraps up the second tier of levels. Only one main tier remains, but before we do that, we do have one little side thing to do. Or 3. For now, let's see what Mona has to say, though. We've got 5 essences. We're getting there. Let's relax and let the dynamo decanter do its thing. But a watched pot never boils. Sure, but right now, something else has caught my eye. This step takes concentration. We must drop the essence in slowly. It's very... Why don't you come over here and help me unjam this lever? The pivot seems to be stuck. It'll take 2 people to wrench it free. Sure. Come closer. Don't be shy. I'm right here. It's kind of awkward, but okay. It won't budge. Put your hand over mine. Okay. If you're sure. The forces of darkness are raging no longer, for I, Percy, have fixed the power. How's it going? Eesh, that's a nasty stuck liver. Need a hoof with that? No, you're good. Fair enough. I'll be in the other room doing science. Well, so much for that. Where were we before? Oh, yeah. That insufferable mole knight escaping that sweltering lost city had me dancing for joy. You dancing? That's... I can't even imagine what that would look like. You see, yes, preposterous, Oh, by the way, take a swig of this health potion I made for you. Maybe it'll help. Hey, I'll take a max of 6 health, that's decent. Let's see, are we at the point where we can get more Cypher coins? Yes, we can, so that means we at least have something to talk about during the next level as well. Wow, that's my whole notebook. Thanks so much for helping me with my research. It means a lot to me. What's that scribbled in the margin there? Honestly, I'm not sure. It probably wouldn't work, even if we collected every last Cypher coin. Anyway, that's everything. Check out our full arsenal. There are a lot you can buy here. In fact, I think this is the only one that adds 2 to a certain type of equipment piece for Plague Knight here. But as you can see, we don't have enough money to get everything, but I do believe I buy some since I got nothing else to spend money on at the moment. I do at least appreciate Plague Knight's arsenal because that it gives you more of a money sink than Shovel Knight had. But that doesn't still go too far. If anything, I appreciate the Messenger for literally adding a money sink to put your extra shards into, and I wish more games would do that. With that said, we're not going straight to the next straight-up night boss fight, or night level. There is a little side level you might remember from the Shovel Knight campaign that we can now access, and that is my first priority. It is kind of weird in retrospect now I think about it, though, because I swear I remember there being more characters to interact with in Plague Knight's campaign from when I last played it. But I think I'm genuinely confusing that with both Spectre Knight's campaign and King Knight, because King Knight especially has, I think, probably the most people to talk to out of any given Shovel Knight expansion. And that jump cut, you can tell how I split up recordings for this particular LP. Oh great, of all the aesthetics to get a little mini level with enemy revisits, it's the darkness mechanic. Great, my favorite. I guess photosensitivity warning. At least for like the next minute, because thankfully these stages aren't that long. You know, something I never really messed too much with for Treasure Trove in specific is they added this little side menu on the title screen that's like direct challenges for every character to do that's completely disconnected to that character's main feat set. And some of those do get kind of intense, and I'm forgetting if any of them kind of tackle ideas like this. Most of them are just like doing a boss fight without getting hit within a certain time limit or things like that, but there's a couple that are like unique challenges, like not getting hit by an endless swarm of the propeller mice for like a minute and a half or something like that. I probably should try to mess with those at some point, because they are at times kind of interesting in concept, even if less so in execution. If there's anything I can really appreciate about the Treasure Trove in total, thanks to it being 4 games in 1 on top of Showdown and the challenges, there's a lot of game here for your buck. It's like playing Yakuza 5 on a sale. You get so much content for that relatively cheap price. Let's enter the Hall of Champions as Plague Knight. Plague Knight, I made welcome, patron. Nothing suspicious happening here. Sure. There he is! The Order's Alchemist! Get him! He can't beat everyone! So while the Hall of Champions for Shovel Knight was us getting the ghosts out of here, that's already happened in the timeline by this point. Plague Knight instead gets to go through and just completely mess up the paintings and guards. Your goal here is to defeat every guard and destroy every painting. And you want to anyway because all the Cypher coins here are hidden behind the paintings. Ah, what an honor. You're back to the game, now you get to blow up your own faces. There are NPCs you can talk to here, but they basically say things like, oh, thank God you're destroying all this gaudy stuff, or how dare you destroy this gaudy stuff, blah, blah, blah. With that said, every single guard you fight here is the exact same ones you fought back at the armor outpost, so it's just like the silver, gold, and bronze guards that are increasing in amounts of health and attack power, but you don't really have to worry about them because you have more than enough resources at this point. Just make sure to also grab the music sheets here as well, but notably, if memory serves at least, While you could do the extra fights at this point in the game, on the PC versions, Nintendo version, and PlayStation version, for those version exclusive fights against like Kratos or the Battletoads, I don't think the expansion campaigns have those from memory. So no extra fights against Kratos here. Not that I would anyway, because that would require playing through the entire game again. And no thank you. At this point. Plague Knight is a campaign at the end of the day I don't like to revisit too often. With that said, keep an eye on your coin count. There are 20 coins you can get here, and thankfully if you've gotten every coin thus far, you'll be at 0, so you know if you have all 20 based off looking at the count at the top left. I do find it kind of slightly disappointing, though, that we got something completely unique here for Shovel Knight and Plague Knight, but if memory serves, you don't even come here as Spectre and King Knight. I think they could have figured out something to do with this place in some regards for those characters, but I don't really remember there being anything. Like, especially Spectre Knight, you probably could have done something with how, quote-unquote, long that takes place before the main campaign for this place, but eh. But again, that's from memory. It has been at least 4 years since I played either of those campaigns. It's going to be interesting to revisit those down the line, especially King Knight, because that was definitely my least favorite when I first played it, and who knows if it is still now. Notably, there is a feat for this area in clearing it in less than 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but I'm not sure if that's for this visit to it, or the revisit you can do immediately after we clear this. If it's for this one, that means you probably only have one chance at it per playthrough, but if it's the other one, then don't worry about it. 3 minutes and 30 seconds is plenty of time as long as you don't just stand around too long. Clearing it in this game's case does mean clearing all of the knights and paintings, I believe. So don't talk to the NPCs either, because that's just a waste of time. And this is a case where using the ability to copy your save file in case that you're messing it up could come in handy. In fact, I tend to do that between every recording for this game just so I have a place to return to redo a level in case I mess up. Too much, at least. I am a slight perfectionist when it comes to the runs I do. Like, if I die too many times, I will just reset the run and retry that section, or if the recording screws up especially that latter one. That happens more often than I'd like to admit in some form. But we've already cleared the ghosts out of here at Shovel Knight's campaign, at least. Yeah, this is what I mean, though, about Shovel Knight and Plague Knight's campaign happening at a weird time stamp with each other. Sometimes you're right after Shovel Knight, sometimes you're there right before it, sometimes it's at the same time, like in Plague Knight's own level. It's really inconsistent. And I guess you could logic it out as that's how long the research takes for the essences and all that, but it's just a matter of this being an extra campaign initially rather than being a main selling point. With that said, as long as you're progressing at a good pace and are good at taking out the knights at a pretty good pace, this level isn't that long, and it's kind of fun in its own regard because of that. Plus, I love the music for it. We surrender, please stop your attack! And for clearing it, I believe we still get a good amount of gold. Have mercy, you can keep everything you pilfer during your rampage. Here, take this gold too. Actually, training against a villain like you is good for morale. Maybe we could work together somehow. Indeed we can! Let's talk to him again. Villain, up for a challenge? My soldiers want a rematch. We're remodeling so we can use help handling the artwork. So here are the rules. Defeat every guard and take down every painting within 210 seconds. I'll just need 500 gold to pay the cleanup crew and hire new curators. Alright. Very well, villain, you may enter, but you have your work cut out for you. Get to it. This is why I'm not sure if the achievement counts the first run or this, because that's exactly 3 minutes and 30 seconds. As long as you focus on using things like the big boom to take out big areas of paintings at once, and focus up knights as hard as you can, you don't have to worry too much about this. This is a pretty easy thing to clear. I'd say 3 minutes and 30 seconds is more than enough time. If it was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, this could be kind of absurdly tight, but it being what it is fine. The main reason we're speeding this up is just so we're not here for almost 30-minute long part. We surrender. Please stop your attack. And you want to do this if you want to get 100% because you do get an item for doing this, however minor it might be. 154 seconds! Surely your renown is no coincidence. Here, for your trouble, we'll be ready next time. And you get yourself a music sheet for doing that, which I will take because that's more money for me to buy more upgrades. A very minor annoying thing about Plague of Shadows, by the way, this is super minor. You don't really have a fast way to get back to the Potionarium, barring how they take you there at the end of every level for the Essence cutscene. Because in Shovel Knight, like, there's two main stores, or two main areas you can go to shop. There's the main town and there's the armor outpost, but you can only buy stuff here by and large as Plague Knight. And at the end of the world map, if you have stuff you still need to buy, that can be quite the distance to travel, even if it only takes like 20 seconds at most. Because unfortunately, I don't even think the catapult that's there on the third portion of the map's too useful, because I think that just sends you back to the armor outpost? Either way, it's super minor. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we go after the first night of the third section of the world map. See you guys then.